From a stalker who shows up to his victim's house in the middle of the night, to a crazy ex-girlfriend who can't take no for an answer. Here are 3 terrifying stalker horror stories from real people. In today's first Reddit post, we hear the story of a woman who went on a few dates with a guy named Hunter. They had a pretty good time together, but she never really felt like he was being honest with her. Hunter seemed like a nice guy, but he also seemed extremely nervous during their dates. He was jumpy, kept looking over his shoulder and answering his phone calls away from her. Despite this, they did have a lot of fun, and the two of them even shared a kiss at the end of their 4th date. But soon after this, things took a turn for the worst. A week later, OP was sitting at home when she heard a knock on the door. She opened it and saw Hunter standing there, holding a bouquet of flowers. When she told him that she didn't want any, and to leave, he became angry, and told her that she couldn't just ignore him after what happened between them. Of course, OP denied that anything had happened between them, and this seemed to only make him angrier. As Hunter continued getting more agitated, OP slammed the door in his face. However, this didn't stop him, because just a few hours later, OP came home from work to find Hunter waiting for her at her front door again. But this time, he wouldn't leave. OP knocked on her window and demanded to speak with her. When she refused, he began banging on her door so hard that her whole house shook. It was at this point that OP called the police, and Hunter was arrested for trespassing. Although she thought that this might be the end of it, just a few days later, Hunter was released and began showing up to OP's house every single day. He would often bang on her windows and scream for her to come out, or he would sit on her lawn and stare directly into her home. At this point, OP was terrified and knew that she needed to do something to make him go away. So she went to the authorities and told them what had been happening. Thankfully, she was finally able to get a restraining order, and Hunter was forced to stay away from her. Looking back, OP realized that she had dodged a bullet. Even though she didn't feel anything romantic with Hunter, she could have easily been taken advantage of if he had broken into her house. And now for our second Reddit post. This user describes how her 6th grade math teacher encouraged a classmate named Chris to stalk her. It all started one day when OP was sitting at home doing her math homework. Her mother walked past her desk and asked what she was doing. OP said that she was working on some problems, and her mom suggested that she call Chris for help. Although OP wasn't close friends with Chris, they did get along well, and he was definitely smarter than her, so she decided to give him a call. As soon as Chris picked up the phone, OP could hear voices in the background, and he told her that he was at school and not to hang up. Before she knew it, Chris was at her house, and he began helping her with her math problems. This actually became somewhat of a regular thing, as Chris would constantly show up to OP's house unannounced and help her with her homework. Sometimes he would even come over just to watch TV. Although this was very helpful to OP, she knew that it was kind of weird that he would just show up to her house at random times. So she decided to ask one of her friends about it. Her friend explained that she had been talking to Chris recently, and he had mentioned having a crush on OP. The friend warned OP that Chris was acting very strange, and that he had even asked her if OP lived alone and how she could let him in if he knocked on the door. At this point, OP realized that Chris might actually be stalking her, and she decided to tell her parents. Her parents were furious and told OP to never open the door if he showed up again. A few days later, Chris showed up anyway and tried to convince OP to let him in. But when she refused, he began banging on the door and yelling for her to let him in. Eventually, OP's dad came to the door and told Chris to leave. And although he complied, he could be seen lurking around the neighborhood. A few days later, OP found a picture of her on Chris's social media page. And when she confronted him, he told her that he had taken the photo while he was at her house and that he thought it was funny. OP immediately told her parents, and the school was notified. Although OP was initially scared that she would be in trouble for letting Chris into her house, her parents made it clear that this was all on Chris. And to their credit, the school took quick action. They suspended Chris and brought in both of his parents for a meeting. In addition to this, the school counselor spoke with OP and told her that Chris's behavior was just a compliment and that she should feel flattered that someone liked her so much. OP was confused by this and argued that she didn't like Chris, but the counselor insisted that she needed to understand that this was just a boy being nice and that she shouldn't be upset. OP ended up telling her parents what the counselor had said, and they were furious. They explained to OP that Chris was stalking her and that the school was trying to cover it up. Thankfully, OP's parents were able to switch her to another school, and the whole situation was eventually forgotten about. And for our final Reddit post, we have this story from a man who was stalked by his ex-girlfriend Emily. The two of them had been dating for a while, and everything seemed to be going well, until they got into a huge fight. During the argument, OP's girlfriend accused him of cheating, even though he had never given her any reason to believe that. OP tried explaining that she was overreacting, but this only made her angrier, and she stormed out of the house. He assumed that she would calm down after a bit, but the next morning, he received a text message from her, saying that he would regret breaking her heart. As the days went by, OP tried calling his girlfriend several times, but she never answered the phone. Just when OP thought that the situation had finally calmed down, his girlfriend began showing up to his house in the middle of the night. Whenever he looked out his window, he could see her sitting on his lawn, staring inside his house. Although this was creepy, OP didn't think too much of it. But then one day, he came home to find his front door completely shattered. When he called the police, they told him that his ex-girlfriend had been arrested for trespassing. He thought that this might be the end of it, but Emily began showing up to his house again. This time she would ring the doorbell, ask to use his phone, and then refuse to leave. Each time he told her that she needed to go, she would argue with him for a while before finally leaving. At this point, OP knew that he needed to do something to make her stop coming to his house. So he called the police and got a restraining order. Unfortunately, this didn't stop her, because just a few weeks later, OP heard a loud bang on his front door in the middle of the night. He opened it and saw Emily standing there with a wild look on her face. She rushed past him and began rummaging through his kitchen cabinets. As OP stood there in shock, she grabbed a large kitchen knife and screamed at him that he would never get rid of her. Although OP was terrified, he was also angry. He grabbed the knife away from his ex-girlfriend and threw it to the ground. He then punched her as hard as he could, knocking her unconscious. When the police arrived, OP explained what had happened, and they arrested Emily for trespassing and breaking the restraining order. Even though OP knew that he probably wouldn't go to jail for defending himself, he still had to deal with the aftermath. He had to testify against his ex-girlfriend, and the whole situation left him feeling drained and exhausted. In the end, Emily was sentenced to 6 months in jail, and OP was finally able to move on with his life. Now check out Crazy Stalker was trying to frame me, or click this other video instead.